So as we covered last week, and we've been covering since, and for everybody who thinks, all right, enough of this story already, when are you going to stop covering East Palestine? The answer is never. I think independent media exists to get stories like this right and to stay on them, because if we don't do it, nobody will. It was independent media and social media that shamed the mainstream media into giving this any airtime whatsoever. So no, we're never going to stop talking about this unless and until it's made right. So Donald Trump obviously visited East Palestine, Ohio last Wednesday, and he was greeted with a welcoming parade of sorts as residents lined the streets in their MAGA swag, showing their support. More Perfect Union, caught up with some Trump supporters while they were waiting for his sort of escort to roll through town, and asked for their perspective on recent events, as well as whether or not they have reconsidered their support for Trump's deregulatory policies while he was in office. So this was super well done. The interviewer here, I believe his name was John Russell. I reached out to him to see if he would come on the show and talk about this. Hopefully he gets back to us because I would love to talk to him more. This was fantastically well done. And so it's not too long, but we're going to play this right now. I think this is really, really worth seeing.
Blame a left side or
Sorry.
when they blame a left side or a right side or this and back and forth. We're not
tired of
it's
that.
not about it's about our town now and people not being able to drink the water, about kids having rations. It's about this thing. That's what this is about.
Norfolk Southern. What do they really owe this community?
They owe this community a lot. They owe us property value. They owe us our health. They owe us 5-10 years from now when things are going on.
This company that's owned by J.P. Morgan, Vanguard, and BlackRock. Alan Shaw's a pawn.
So
He's a pawn. He makes $8 million a year. $8 million a year. He lives in an 8,000-foot square mansion. He doesn't care about the people.
They're going to make their money, man. Their trains are going to roll no matter what. Whether we're here or not, we're just ants to them. Industrial accidents can be prevented. Every industrial accident that's ever happened in the country can be prevented. Preventative maintenance.
Trump in 2018, I get the policies. The policies weren't great. That's fine. And you know what? If Trump has to take a little bit of the blame, I'm good with that. But you know what? This administration has had the House, the Senate, the presidency for the last 2 years. They changed a lot of policies.
They imposed a contract and stopped the rail workers from striking. I mean, tell me a little bit, do you feel like the rail workers should have struck?
Absolutely, they should have, because of what has happened.
If Donald Trump was in power right now, what kind of things would you expect him to do to make a situation like this right?
well, it's not about what I would expect Donald Trump to do. It's about what I would expect the leader of our country to do. And if Donald Trump was here to do something, if he was the president, I would expect him to do the same thing that Biden would do, and that would be to come in here and fix up what needs to be fixed up.
We're not wealthy, we're not the top 1%, but we just want what's
We're not
done
after
right.
for money, we're after for fixing so we can stay where we've lived forever.
Yeah.
That's an amazing segment, and apparently there's more to come. More Perfect Union say they have a more full report coming out on that. But that's such a fantastic segment, talking about, you see the guy out there in his Trump hat, talking about, of course, the rail workers should have been allowed to strike, talking about Alan Shaw's worth $8 million, he lives in a mansion, doesn't care about us, calling out BlackRock by name, calling out Vanguard Group by name. You think the MSNBC viewers even know what BlackRock even is? I doubt it. No. Like, I'm sorry, these MAGA working class people are so much more tuned in to what is going on. You might not agree with their opinions, with their prescriptions to fix what is going on, but they are so much more tuned into the reality of what's going on, and they have a class consciousness hardwired in them because, as he said, we're not wealthy, we're not the 1%. Right? There's the old phrase that say, well, poor people don't consider themselves poor. They call themselves, temporarily embarrassed rich people, because the idea is that most Americans are brainwashed into thinking that they too are going to be rich someday. I feel like the MAGA movement is in some way an expression of a certain reckoning with the idea that that's not possible. It's born of a certain despair. As much as it is jingoistic in tone, it is born of a certain realization, a certain sense of hopelessness, a certain sense of the degradation that the middle class has gone through and that the working class has gone through, that you just feel coming from these guys when they speak. And this is part of a continuation of the conversation when we had on your guys' show. I guess it was about a month back at this point. I don't see any of that in the Democratic power base. I don't see any of that. Therefore, I don't see a point in continuing to try and appeal to those people, to those viewers, to the MSNBC people. I don't see any of this there. None of it. Here I see something we could at least work with, So what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, we've been saying for a long time a couple of things. One, the thing that is going to unify anything in this country is going to be labor. Like, we all need to get behind labor. That's how things are going to happen in this country. So that's the organic uprising that basically we really need here. I mean, obviously a general strike would be amazing, but that's the uprising we need here from an economic perspective. What it also screams to me is it's so pathetic that the Democrats have just totally thrown labor. It's just more proof that they are no longer labor. They are the corporate people. And what they're doing is they're allowing the populists to all filter to the right, because they don't address any of these things. They don't speak for working people. And so why would the working people be with them? So, I mean, I see a lot of things in that. But yeah, we've known for a long time that this isn't a left and right thing. This is a class war. And the people that are seemingly to address that more are the people on the right.
Yeah, you're going to go wherever the votes are going to be, as long as you're not talking about completely, flipping over the table regarding the economic and political infrastructure that is the United States. But that is where we're headed, because enough people are just not going to take it anymore. And I don't blame them. How could you? You're looking at an ecological disaster that may be the worst this country's ever seen. And there are people that are going to get sick and are going to die because they have no other options. They're being told that everything's fine, even though, obviously More Perfect Union is there. Our friends at Status Quo are there. And they say that it smells like, if you're in East Palestine, they said it smells like gasoline if you walk around the town. I don't know about you, but if I'm smelling gasoline, that means there's a problem. And that means you need to get as far away from that problem as possible, as fast as possible.
I think that what it really comes down to, Keaton, is the Democrats are they've gotten so sanctimonious and elitist, and that they just do not speak to regular people. And they have actually created this reverse in this country where now that seems to be the Republicans, sort of like that's their lane now. They now have that lane. Trump, especially when he, how he campaigned, not necessarily what he did, but he campaigned very populist. And so that's now what he's going to reach. He did very well in those states. I mean, that's the thing. So obviously the right is taking on the role of labor.
We're living in a country where we're looking at these people like they're somehow going to save us. They're not saving anything.
When you say they, what do you mean they?
I still think that there are millions of people in this country who are looking at the likes of like a Bernie Sanders or a Donald Trump and saying, save us. We need you to help us. It's like the people who put a lot of faith into AOC, thinking that, she was going to be this revolutionary rabble rouser that was going to really tear things up on Capitol Hill. And we obviously know that's
we like heroes and villains.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very easy to gravitate towards that sentiment. But what we have to realize is that the labor movement, as documented by, and if you guys haven't seen our latest podcast with Railroad Workers United and members that are actually on the ground in East Palestine, we highly recommend you go and check it out. It really is about labor. Like, that is where the fight is going to be won and lost.
And the Democrats just stuck like the final nail in the coffin a couple months ago. So, where there is totally a connection between what happened with the railroad workers strike potential and this. There's totally a connection.
And as many of you will remember, during the 2020 election in particular, the Biden camp wasn't out there actively seeking Bernie AOC voters. They were out there seeking suburban Republican voters to leave Trump and come to their side. So what do you think happens when you get that voter into your party? You're going to cater to their needs. Catering to workers' needs? Now it's just wide open that, hey, if you're not funding our party to the tune of millions of dollars, we ain't got no use for you, pal. And they're going to go somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so not to prod, but when it comes to my critique of Democratic voters as how they are the real problem, because you're appealing to people who have no sense of the stakes because they are completely insulated. Like you would never hear the upper middle class Democratic voter talking like that. And if you did, they would give you what I've called on this show a million times before, the liberal cat stare. They stare at you like a cat, like they know you're talking to them, but they have no idea what you're saying. They just give you this blank kind of look, and then they go back to the salad or whatever, if you're having lunch with them. How much more blood is there to draw from that stone? And because this segues into our next segment, so maybe we'll follow this up in the next segment, because when you have someone like Rachel Maddow mocking an anti-war rally, and then you have someone like Tucker Carlson talking up the anti-war rally,
right,
it's not just a matter of which of those two do you like better, it's a matter of which viewership is more accessible to you, which viewer base is more persuadable. And that question really impacts how you are going to approach something like an anti-war rally that has a mixed bag in terms of left-wing and right-wing participation. Do you have anything to add to that, or was that too obtuse? Should we just go right into the other segment?
No, I actually think that there's a very important comment that was made by Dan, who's got the Pringles guy as his avatar.
Okay, I'll try and find it, but you have it
slightly up. I'm in a labor union.
Oh, here, okay,
That's absolutely correct. What we hear constantly in this country is that we are a socially liberal and fiscally conservative country. Actually, no, we're not. We're a socially conservative and economically progressive country, and it bears itself out in statistical data across the board, whether it is the issue of the LGBTQ community and how the trans issue has become a front and center issue versus universal health care, living wage, clean environment, endless war, civil liberties, criminal justice reform. These are economically progressive issues, and the overwhelming majority, 3/4, 4/5 of the country agree on these issues. When you bring this to the forefront, when you bring the issues of, hey, how do you feel about trans people in this context? How do you feel about this particular information, like adding queer studies to African American studies, as they were trying to do here in Florida? You're not going to get the majority of people to agree with it, because the majority of people do not agree with it. Me, I don't care. It's what it is. But if you're talking about who's voting, who's actually going to get involved, how people are going to fight to enact change, you're not going to get millions of people in the streets to fight for those particular wedge issues. You will get millions of people in the streets to fight for universal health care.
Yeah.
You will get millions of people in the streets to fight for the easiest reason to fight for a living wage, especially if you're on the right, is, do you want people dependent on government to survive? No. You don't want the government anywhere near you if you can avoid it. So pay a living wage.
Right.
That's a way to do it.
Yeah.
And unions, labor unions that are not shiftless and corrupt, especially just the labor movement in general, that's how you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And one other difference is, guys like that out in that More Perfect Union video, I have absolutely no doubt those guys out there with the Bush beer, and that just made me thirsty for a cheap beer. Something like watching a bunch of guys drink cheap beer and are on a rainy day with an umbrella. It's just a vibe, I dig it. But anyway, those guys with the beer there, if I crack open a beer with them, I guarantee you, give me an hour, I will have all three of them on board for universal health care. Guaranteed. No doubt about it.
Great.
Absolutely no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
You got these Democratic voters, these comfortable Democratic voters, 90% of whom already say they're for Medicare for all, but they never vote that way because they have other interests that they have to weigh. So who is which of these mines is more worth digging through? Where are there more diamonds? It to me, it's not even a question. It's not even a question. And so all this bullshit, and this is where it does get into the Rage Against War stuff, which you and I might have a slightly different take on, but this is where, when I say, oh, there are right-wingers at the rally, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if there are right-wingers at the rally.
We don't care about that.
No. Okay, fine. Perhaps I spoke too soon. I don't want to get you in trouble. But this is where, it doesn't matter to me. I don't want to hear anything about, I don't want to hear the ick being put on guys like Tucker or Tucker's viewers, because it's just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. We know now, we've run this experiment enough times to know that there's a dead end in the Democratic Party, because even when you get 90% consensus on the Bernie platform, Bernie gets stuck with 35% of the vote because most of the people voting don't care about the issues. They tell you up front they don't care about the issues. We only care about who can beat Trump. We have to beat Trump. That's all that matters. So what are you even doing? What are you even doing? Whereas you don't know how guys like that in that video, you don't know how they're going to put into action a pro-Medicare for all stance because they don't have it yet. They don't have it yet. They don't know they're for it yet. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that in a way that, you know, they grew up in Republican households. They have a justified skepticism of the government. Like you said, Peter, yeah, of course you want the government out of your life as much as they can be, right? And so it's just a matter of communicating a common sense message to people, but a guy who already has the critique that, yeah, a billionaire company that runs poison through our town and is nowhere to be found when the shit rolls off the tracks, it explodes in the atmosphere. Of course they don't care about us because we're not wealthy, and there's an implication in there that he understands that he's never going to be wealthy, unlike how we traditionally think of the Republican voter as someone who aspires to be rich. There's almost more of a European-style class consciousness. That's why Europeans are more class conscious, because they have a monarchy still, right, in many countries in Europe. So like they understand that you kind of are, you finish where you start in terms of what your class status is. And a lot of working people have, I think, subconsciously absorbed that sort of understanding of society. It transcends even what their political opinions are, red, blue. They have the right theory of society, whereas the libs are still about this American dream shit. They even said that in 2016 when they had the red, white, and blue balloons fall from the ceiling. I heard the CNN pundit say this felt like a very Reagan-esque convention, right? They've reclaimed patriotism because that's what they were selling. They were selling, as Hillary herself said, America's already great. And Donald Trump was selling Make America Great Again. Sorry, I went on too long.
When were we great? Like, I'm just not into all that nationalism. That's just not my bag.
Well, neither am I.
It's all a bunch of hooey. But you know, I think that when we're looking at, I guess, the supporters that we're looking at, that when we're talking about the Trump people, like the ones that we would see that we would call like the extreme people, is a very small group of people, and most of the people that are Trump supporters are just regular people. And Democrats cannot appeal to regular people. That's the moral of the story, is that now that has become the right is claiming populism, and the left is now like basically the party of elitism. And it's just, that's just the way they've chosen to do it. And that, I would say, is more a la Bill than anything. I mean, that was really when I would say it really started to pull, where Democrats were no longer even affiliated with labor. And this is a labor issue, hands down. Like, the people in this town recognize that. They all know that. They know that this is an issue of class, and that this is an issue of the big bad railroad carrier, and they get it.
And they're getting closer and closer to putting two and two together.
Please clap.